Hello, welcome. My name is Mike Atkins, just in case anybody doesn't know me, and I'm the TO for Vanguard GT, which is coming up last weekend in April here in lovely yet currently kind of cold Fredericksburg, Virginia. It'll be warmer by the end of April, I promise, for everybody camping out. You have nothing to worry about. Virginia weather is perfectly reasonable and predictable for the season it's in and month at all times. Um, the tournament is coming up, and as such, I like doing lots of updates to try to inform everyone. I like to have as many people well informed and to know what's going on before they get here as possible. Just because it makes the weekend go smoother. Everybody feels like they're well informed. They know what the plan is. And also, the more people who know how things are supposed to run, that means there are people other than me that can answer questions um, for folks who um, don't read all the updates or watch all the videos. So I like to carpet bomb people with updated information. Try to get as much of it to sink in as I can, just make everybody get that nice warm and fuzzy that folks know what's up, um, and to help make the weekend go smoothly, and also help you guys make decisions about what you want to do army wise, in terms of what army and what list and anything painting related that you want to do. So I'm going to do a few videos. All the information that I'm going to cover is either already on the website or will be on the website after I update it after these videos. Um, but I know people absorb information more effectively in different mediums. Some folks, read information and pick it up really easily, and some folks it's easier to absorb something if you hear someone explain it, or if you see graphics that explain things and stuff like that. So I try to do information in a couple different formats just to help people do it. I love being told how something works rather than having to read a description of it. Things usually sink into me a little better when I hear someone telling me about it. So I like to do these for folks out there who are like me, who are better, auditory learners versus visual learners. So enough of me blabbing about the meta shit of why I'm here. Let me get to what I actually want to talk about. So I'm going to start with this subject this year to make sure people have as much time as possible to plan, and that is how we're going to do the scoring for the games this year. So quick little bit of background. I usually do blackjack with a 2 point bonus objective where I shave 1 point off of the scenario and attrition adjustments and use that to make up a 2 point bonus objective, which I will talk about in another video, as that's a thing that I do differently and I want to make sure everybody understands it. So the total still comes up to 21 points. And this year I've decided to do something a bit different. So let's talk about what that is then. So I made some slides. And so my kind of goal with what we're going to do is I want something that rewards scenario play, because I'm a big fan of scenarios. I think that's one of the things that helps make Kings of War fun games. It's not just two armies trying to kill each other. It unlocks lots of different play styles and lots of different armies and list types to focus on scenario versus just killing stuff. And I think anything that you do as a TO to encourage variety in the armies and their play styles that people bring makes for a more fun event, because it makes it more likely that all 5 games are going to feel distinct for the players, feel different. You feel like you played 5 very different armies rather than you feel like you played basically the same style of list over and over again. So anything to increase variety makes it more fun for you guys. And I feel like a scoring system that tells people to focus on scenario first and attrition second is a good thing to do. You still get rewarded for attrition. We're not going to not count it at all, but that's the sort of first principle: is scenario first, attrition second. Second, I want something that will bias players towards action, because I know there some folks are kind of critical of blackjack, in that since it is a delta based system where you subtract scenario points and you subtract attrition points to come up with the total. It can be advantageous to play very conservatively, especially later in the game, and not take risks and not go for something because the trade-off might not be worth it. You might lose units in order to get an objective, and by losing those units you end up slipping in the brackets and losing an attrition point that you would have gotten if you would have just sat still. And that math can be hard for people to do in their heads. So it sometimes encourages people to just like sit on what they have and let the game wrap up. So we want something that will bias folks towards action to encourage people to go for it and take risks later on in the game. I'm also looking for something that has reasonable margins of victory. One of the criticisms of Northern Kings is that the margins are very, very, very large, or can be very large. And a player that gets a couple of really big wins early in the tournament can build an almost insurmountable lead, and that tends to turn people off. So you want something with like reasonable margins of victory, based on the scenario and the attrition play, and you want that to be like a fairly steady curve from tabling your opponent and getting them all down to like a straight draw or whatever. And you want the results to reflect what people put into the game, and how close it was. Like close games should be closely scored. Blowouts should still have a good margin, but not so much that nobody's going to catch them. And also another thing that I alluded to is that it should be pretty easy to calculate in game. People ought to be able to eyeball a potential play late in game and decide whether it's really worth it for them to do with the big picture of the whole tournament in mind or not. And that's something that can be a little tricky with blackjack. With Northern Kings, it's sometimes a little more straightforward, but sometimes there being only 5 scenario points, scenario bonus points, people might forget that and go for like a sixth scenario point or 7th scenario point or something like that doesn't actually get them anything because they've forgotten that we only go up to 5 or something like that. So something that is pretty straightforward. You can do the math in your head really easily, and you can weigh those trade-offs and make intelligent choices and feel like you understand what you're trying to do in a game and what you stand to gain by taking risks, especially late game. So those are kind of the 4 bullet points of what I'm going for. And of course, in the next couple of slides, I'm going to try to convince you guys that I'm going to do something that meets all 4 of these. So let's see how convincing I can be there. So first, too long didn't read. There's going to be math content after this. It's going to be hard. People's eyes are going to glaze over. I totally understand. I'll try to tell people like these are the takeaways when we get to them. But big picture, TLDR, we're going to switch from the modified blackjack that I normally do to a modified bull shroud system. For those of you who were at Pilgrimage or have been reading, like there was a Dash 28 article about it, bull shroud is a scoring system that was devised in England by Steve Hildrew and Mark Cunningham for their tournaments, which I think are called like Bull Run and Shroud of the Reaper. That's why it's called Bull Shroud. It's a very low margin system that focuses on scenario play, possibly too low margin. And they've made some modifications to it, which and then that most recently updated modified system is what we played at Pilgrimage. And since then, the regional TOs, we've sort of put our heads together to talk about how we thought it went. And the general consensus seems to be that it worked better than we expected it to, having just sort of read it, because we were very concerned. It had also been used at the UK Masters and had gotten some negative feedback there, which they've taken some steps to address. And I think, our consensus was that better than we thought it was going to be, but probably still needs a couple more tweaks to really be where we would want it to be. Like it needs a little more work. So we proposed a couple of more changes that we might like to see done to it. And so I decided after thinking about that, that's what I would try for this year. I would just sort of continue that experiment and get another data point to see whether our proposed changes actually moved it to a place that we were happy with. So congratulations, you're all test subjects. We hope you enjoy it. But so now I'm going to try to sell you on this new thing being a good idea. So here's some of the details. I am going to refer to this modified bull shroud system as Bart Shroud. Rob Allison coined that term, referring, of course, to Bart Kohler, who would crunch some of the math for us. So here's the high level parts to it. It is a positive only system, similar to Northern Kings, in that you don't subtract points from anyone like you do in blackjack. It's not a delta based system, um, and that plays a lot into the biasing people towards action. Right? You don't lose points for losing units. You only gain points for killing stuff and getting scenario points. So that helps towards one of our objectives. The way we envisioned it amongst the TOs was a 14-point game. But here, since I like my 2-point objectives, my 2-point bonus objectives, I'm going to put those on top to make it a full 16-point game, which I like a little better than shaving off a point from the attrition and scenario here for March Round. And I'll have math on that later that I'll show you guys. But so that's how it's going to be 16-point max per game, which gives a total of 80 battle points max for the event, which is a bit lower than usual with the other systems. But I'm not going to change the soft score numbers. It's still 30 points max for sports and 30 points max for appearance, which nobody ever really gets because I don't believe in things like perfect paint scores. So you can still assume that like 10 to 12 points is going to be the average. Most folks are going to score in that range for both appearance and sports. Somebody, the sports winner usually is in like the 16 to 18 point range. So it's not so far out of whack that bringing the battle points down, I don't think in practice is going to make the soft scores a noticeably larger factor. I think it's still going to feel about right for my overall approach of in a 5-game tournament, you're really playing 7 games. Game 6 is appearance and game 7 is sports. So there you go. There's sort of the big picture stuff. And now the specifics of how this is going to work. So win, draw, and loss are going to be worth 3 points, 1 point, and 0 points, respectively. This is one of our 2 changes from the most recent version of Bull Shroud, which only does 2 points for a win. But we felt like that wasn't quite enough to reward a win. It's still a very small amount of points to give someone for just a win, and I'll display that to you guys later. But we felt like you needed just a little bit more, so 3 points there to kind of help provide a little bit more of a margin because Bull Shroud was a very, very low margin system as written. Scenario is going to be 7 points max, and it's going to be a really straightforward 1 per VP up to 7. And I know that can complicate things with some of the scenarios like dominate or invade, where you're counting unit strength or scoring units. And I'll just tell you, folks, right now, I'm just not using those. I'm not using any of those. All the scenarios I'm using have either 7 points available to each player, or I think 8, because I'm doing at least one of the bluff token scenarios, and they have a total of 8. So the 8th one is just not worth a point. So that's going to make it pretty simple for people to calculate in their heads when every scenario point translates to a tournament point. So that goes back to one of our other goals of making it something easy to calculate in your head. Attrition-wise, this is the other thing we changed, where we thought there should be 4 points worth of attrition bonuses available rather than 3. And it is just a straight 1 per 20% of the total points routed. And the numbers there are, not super intuitive, because, 20% of 2,300 points doesn't just roll off the top of your noggin, but the buckets are something like 460 points, 920 points, 1,380, and 1,840. Not that I expect anyone to memorize those or have them in their heads, but you just know that there are 4 points worth of attrition available, and they're per 20 points per 20%. And the first bucket is only 460 points. So if you kill 500 points worth of stuff, which I think typically always is going to happen, like you kill 2 or 3 units, unless you're getting totally shut out, you'll kill that much, and you'll walk away with at least one scenario, or excuse me, one attrition point. And then there's the 2-point bonus objectives that I've talked about, which I will talk about in more detail in another video. And so those are the components of it. 16 points max, 3 points if you win, up to 7 points for the scenario, 1 per scenario point, 4 points max for attrition, 1 per 20% of the total points of the army routed, and then 2 points for a bonus. So that kind of explains a couple of our goals about it, which I feel like hit it pretty well, in that it's easier to calculate in your head than something like blackjack during the game. So let's see if we can sell you guys on the rest. So here's where the math comes in. So in an example game, comparing what we're going to do this time to other systems, in a game of pillage, assuming 7 tokens, let's talk a little bit about what the actual margins look like for some wins here. So I'm looking at what we've got here are the 4 different systems we're talking about: blackjack, Northern Kings, standard bull shroud, and Bart shroud, where we assume the winner always gets their bonus objective and the loser does not, so they always get the 2 points. So the maximum point spread for all of these is across the top. For blackjack, of course, it's 21. For Northern Kings, the max point spread is actually 20, because you always start with 5 points and you don't lose any, and the max is 25, which is a little weird. It can make it a little hard to figure out what you need to do in your head to get enough points, because you always get at least 5. Makes people feel good about it, though, so whatever. And standard bull shroud, which is only 12 points of max spread, max margin there, and for Bart shroud plus the bonus, it's going to be 16 points. So obviously, if you completely table your opponent and get all the objectives, you get that many points, right? It's a 21 point difference between you and your opponent, or a 20 point difference between you and your opponent, or a 12 or 16 point difference. But it's mostly like the devil's in the details. So let's talk about some example game results and what they look like under the different systems. So what I would call a big win is like a 6-1 scenario win, where you kill 2,000 points and your opponent only kills 500. So what does that look like across the different scoring systems here? So in blackjack, that would get you an 18-3. In Northern Kings, that would get you a 24-7. In bull shroud, standard bull shroud, that would get you an 11-1. And in Bart shroud, what we're going to do at Vanguard, that would get you a 14-2. And then the other number that I've got in there is the percentage of the total possible max spread that win will get you, that the winner gets over the loser. So, for example, in blackjack, in the first column there, you take 18, you subtract 3, you divide that by 21, and you get 71%. So, getting a big win in blackjack will get you 71% of the possible max spread between the winner and the loser. And that might not seem like it means anything to you, but I thought these numbers might be interesting to check some of our goals against the different systems. Because when you pop over to Northern Kings and bull shroud, standard bull shroud, we can see that the percentage of the max spread there for big wins in Northern Kings is 85%, and in bull shroud is 83%. But then in Bart shroud plus a bonus, it's back down to 75. So it's closer to blackjack, which I think is good, because I was talking about wanting reasonable margins. I think blackjack has fairly reasonable margins. It's just got some other issues that people don't like about, biasing people against action, and being a little difficult to calculate. So if our margins here are more in line with blackjack and less necessarily in line with standard Northern Kings or standard bull shroud, then I think I'm doing the right thing here. Maybe folks agree or disagree. So moving down to the next one, just keep banging through these. An average win, like a 5-2 scenario win, where you kill 1750 and your opponent kills 850, so like a little closer together. In blackjack, that would net you a 17-4. In Northern Kings, you'd still get 24 points, because again, you only get 5 points worth of scenario, so it'd be a 24-9 this time. Standard bull shroud, that'd be a 10-3. And in Bart shroud plus bonus for Vanguard, that'd be a 13-3. And so again, we see here that the Northern Kings margin is still the largest one at 75%. So you still have a really large margin of victory, even in an average win. But in blackjack, it's 62, and in bar shroud, it's 63. So we're still pretty close to the margins of victory between the winner and the loser in terms of the spread, as what blackjack got. And bull shroud dropped way down. And I think this is one of the things about bull shroud that people are a little iffy about, is that its margins drop off really fast. And the margins get really, really close towards the lower end, but are still really high at the top end. So like big wins at bull shroud can still get you way out in front of the pack, like Northern Kings, and slightly less big wins will leave you kind of far away and maybe make it difficult for you to catch up. So that's good. So hopefully what we're doing here with the bonus objectives, the extra point for the win, and the extra point for attrition, helps keep the margins closer to blackjack, therefore closer to what we're trying to do here. A small win, that's a 4-3 scenario win. So just winning by 1. You kill 1,500 points. Your opponent kills 1,200 points. So again, pretty close together. In blackjack, that would net you a 15-6. In Northern Kings, that would get you a 22-10. In bull shroud, that would get you an 8-5. And in bar shroud plus bonus, that'll get you a 12-5. So again, here the percentage difference, the percentage of the spread between the winner and the loser in blackjack is 43, and 44 for bar shroud. So right there, just ever so slightly larger than blackjack, but not by much. And Northern Kings again is first with 60%, still really big margins. And bull shroud, here's where it drops way off at 8-5. That's only 25% of the available spread between the winner and the loser there. So bull shroud starts with a really huge margin between winner and loser, then really quickly comes down to the middle, probably more than people want. And that's where like some of the negative feedback of bull shroud of like the margins between a win and a loss are too small to be meaningful. And here we can see, especially at the small end, it contracts down a lot. But bar shroud plus bonus is still kind of in the sweet spot where we want. Less than Northern Kings and more consistent in how it scales than bar shroud, which starts huge and gets really small. And then another example that I wanted to put in here, because several of these are additive scoring systems, was the notion of a minimal win. Because and this is one of those things about blackjack that we don't necessarily like, is that you can go in and you can fight it out and get that small win and basically get the same score, or more or less the same score, as if you had both sat on your hands and done nothing. So we wanted to see, what the difference in drop off was as part of that biasing people towards action. So we got a minimal win where it's literally a 1-0, and you both only kill 500 points worth of stuff, right? This is probably not a fun game because the two opponents sat around staring at each other for most of the game. Maybe one of them like scouted up onto one objective, and then you guys just kind of stood back and shot at each other a little bit and healed things, and like not much happened. That's a boring game. We don't really want to do that. So in blackjack, that will still net you a 14-7, which is just 1 point lower than the small win where you went out and it was 4-3 and you killed 1,500 points worth of stuff. In Northern Kings, it drops off by quite a bit, though. It drops down to 17-6 versus the 22-10. So that's less points for everybody. In bull shroud, it drops way down, an 8-5 down to a 3-0, which is a lot. Like that's a lot of points. And then bar shroud plus bonus, which is what we're going to do at Vanguard. Even this minimal win will get you a 7-1, assuming that the winner always gets their bonus, which is still a lot less than a 12-5, but not quite as dramatic a drop off as standard bull shroud. So still, if you're not sure, you still hold it, but there's still a lot to be gained, especially for the person who comes out behind, the person who's going to lose. There's still a lot of points for them to be gained by at least going for it and seeing what happens. And in terms of that spread percentage, blackjack is still 33 and bar shroud is 38. So still pretty close to that. Northern Kings is still 55%. You get 55% of the spread for a minimal win. Northern Kings very, very heavily rewards just winning the game, in addition to biasing you in favor of actions, but still really big margin. And here, standard bull shroud again is still 25%. Like it's still at the lower end. The margins are really, really small. So I feel like having gone through this exercise, Northern Kings is on the high end of the spread between the winner and the loser, which is something that we knew, but that plays out mathematically when you look at example games. Bull Shroud is a really small margin system, which we knew, but it again plays out mathematically. We see that for a very big win, Bull Shroud has a really big margin of difference, but then it very quickly contracts down to really small margins, and that's maybe something that we don't want to see. But that the proposed Bart Shroud plus a bonus objective here has slightly larger margins than Blackjack, but only by a max of 5% or less. So in terms of like how big the difference is between the winner and the loser, it's going to feel more like the differences in a Blackjack score than a Northern Kings or a Bull Shroud score, and I think that's kind of what I'm looking for. But there are things about Blackjack that we don't like. So now let's talk about why, if the margins are roughly the same between the winners and the losers, why Bart Shroud over Blackjack. So when we talk about these are examples where I've considered like, okay, if I were to like shoehorn my 2-point bonus objectives into the other three systems, what would the percentage breakdown of the scores be like? Like how much of your score is due to you winning the game, you getting scenario points, you killing your opponent, or you getting the bonus. So that's what we're looking for there. So as you can see, Blackjack and Northern Kings give you a ton of points just for winning. Like winning by 1 will get you 66% of the maximum points in Blackjack and 60% of the maximum points in Northern Kings. So those don't really bias you towards trying to win big all that much. If you win by 1, you get a pretty big margin. Bull Shroud, again, does 17%, pretty small. Bart Shroud plus bonus objective is 19%. So that 1 more point only gives you a little bit more, but it is still something. And the big differences here come, of course, in scenario and attrition. So scenario point wise, Bull Shroud, a full 50% of the points come from getting scenario points, right? Of course, if you win, you get 1 more scenario point than the loser, at least 1. So like Bull Shroud, it's not really only 2 points, it's really 3 points because it's 2 for the win plus 1 for the 1 point that you must have gotten to win. Same thing with Bart Shroud, it's 3 points plus the 1 point you must have gotten to win, so it's really 4. But we said in our goals, we wanted something that rewarded scenario play first and attrition second. And I think that's what we've got here, in that the scenario accounts for a full 44% of the Bart Shroud points, and attrition is 25%, which is the next highest bucket. In both Northern Kings and Blackjack, they are smaller significantly than the amount of points you get just for winning. Even when you add the two together, right? In Blackjack, it's 14 points your score for scenario and 10% for attrition. And in Northern Kings, since they're 5 points each, it's just 16% for each of them. So in both of those cases, if you win the game at all, you've already gotten most of the points that you can get. Whereas with Bull Shroud and Bart Shroud, just winning only gets you a bit. And so that I think biases people towards action, right? You need to go out and try to get stuff to get the points. You can't just rely on the small wins to get you by as much as you might like. So I think I'm pretty happy with this. I think I like that Bart Shroud, like we said, focuses on scenario first and attrition second. And that's what we can see here, is that the single largest bucket of points in Bart Shroud is for scenario, and the second largest is for attrition. Just go back to the beginning and we'll go through our... Right, so reward scenario play first and attrition second. Those are the 2 largest buckets. for where the points come from. So I think we did that. Biases you towards action. I think it does that because it does not punish you for losing units since it's only additive scoring. And you have to go out and try to kill stuff, and there's 4 points worth of attrition to get. So you got to try to you want to try to do that, and you want to try to get out as many objectives as possible. So I think it does bias you towards action, especially late game, because it doesn't punish you for taking risks with units that aren't needed to hold objectives. Right, throwing those units away to try to get an objective or to try to kill something can only help you late game. It doesn't. It can't possibly hurt you unless you end up losing a scenario point because of it. So, but I think that's kind of the trade-off that we want to make here. If you've got a unit left that you don't need to hold an objective, you might as well go try to kill someone with it. So I think I like that. Reasonable margins. I think I showed that in that the margins are only slightly larger than blackjack and significantly smaller than Northern Kings, and more consistent in how they scale up and down than standard Bull Shroud. And I think easy to calculate during game. I think we also accomplished that because it's just 1 point for 1 point, up to 7 for the scenarios. And again, the scenarios I'm going to pick are only going to have 7 or 8 points available. So I think that's there. And then just a straight, 20 per 20% of units killed. It's pretty easy. I mean, adding points up in your head is tough, but like when you're biased towards action and you just want to kill stuff and you'll be rewarded for it, then just go out and kill stuff and don't lose any scenario points. So I think this is going to work for what we want. We're going to try it. Again, this is an update from what was tried at Pilgrimage. Mathematically, I think it looks like it does what I want it to do. It should be fun to play, I hope. So we will see. We will, of course, be interested in feedback. That's not the royal we. That's like me and the other TOs in the region who kind of put our heads together to kibitz about what modifications we would like to see to Bull Shroud. So let's see how this goes. So I think I've been talking for like half an hour at this point. So I'm sure most people will watch this with the the playback speed sped up. So I'll talk a little faster. But I appreciate anybody who watched all of this. Hopefully you feel good about this and you're excited to try it out. Coming up, I'm going to have videos where I talk about the specific bonus objectives. I'm going to have videos where I show you guys how we're going to input scores this year. And I'm going to talk about just like tournament logistics and getting in and out of the venue and everything else that you guys might need to know. The website is not updated with this scoring info yet, but it will be in the next couple of days. Lists are not due until the week before the tournament, so you still have plenty of time on that. So take this. Keep forgetting I got to gesture the opposite direction. Take what we've got in this video, what the scoring system is going to be. Think about it. Think about what list changes you might want to do, what kind of armies you think might do well under this kind of system. Definitely units that will score a lot of scenario points and kill stuff and be able to do the bonus objective will do good. But first things first, you have to have scoring units to score as many objective points as possible, which I think I like. So yeah, get your theory hammer hats on and figure out what kind of list you want to bring to this. You have roughly a little over a month before lists are going to be due to figure out what you want to do. So have fun doing that, and we'll see who comes up with what and which thing works the best. I think that's about all I have for this time. So everybody keep painting and keep list crafting. And Vanguard GT is coming up at the end of April. I'm super excited to see everybody. I hope you guys are too. And we'll see you next time.